This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Army's Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. On today's episode, he's going to be checking out the varied arsenal of the 2010 classic Fallout New Vegas.
Well, that puts a smile on the face, doesn't it? The Fat Man Nuka Launcher, based on some real technology, the Davy Crockett Tactical Nuclear Launcher.
If there are any other games, guns and mechanics that you guys want to see Jonathan break down, let us know in the comments section below. Make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one, and if you'd like to help out the Royal Army's Museum and continue to support Jonathan's work, check out the links in the description of this video. Right, over to Jonathan.
I've not played this in a long time, but this has been one of my favourite games. But we're not here to talk about that, we're here to talk about weapons. And the laser RCW, or the Tommy gun in space, is almost a direct translation of the actual silhouette of a Thompson submachine gun to a fictional laser weapon. So much so that in the first person view, you've actually got the disassembly button on the back of the receiver. So that there are features that are taken from the Tommy gun that wouldn't really make sense on the laser gun. But looks the part. We've still got the iconic Thompson drum magazine, but it stays on the weapon, and the laser energy pack is taken off and inserted from the front of it. So that's interesting as well, in that why is it shaped like a drum when the drum doesn't even come off and you're replacing the thing in the middle? So it's a deliberate homage to the Thompson gun. Something I noticed because of the third person side view that we got there is the recoil. So this is called a laser weapon, and it fires pretty much a beam, or like a pulsed beam of ostensibly laser light. Light doesn't recoil, so unless this is actually a plasma weapon of some kind and it's just called a laser gun, it should not recoil into the shoulder like it does. So I think that's a stylistic choice, because a gun that's as powerful as relatively powerful as this, and is representing the Tommy gun, might look weird if it didn't recoil. Well, to my shame, I did not put this on the table behind me, but this is effectively the anti-materiel rifle from Fallout New Vegas. It's by far the closest to a real-world weapon in the game that I can think of, that I remember. And this is a 50 caliber Browning machine gun monster, and it kind of has to be hefted to be believed. It pretty much functions as it does in the game, and of course in Fallout this thing is absolutely devastating, and because of the ability to load, in fact make, your own ammunition in various different flavours, we saw incendiary in use as well. Interestingly, when an incendiary round hits the ground, which I hadn't remembered, doesn't initiate seemingly, but when it hits a target, human, deathclaw, whatever, it goes up in flames appropriately enough. And I'm going to put this down before I hurt myself. As befits a desert western type setting, albeit in a parallel desolate future, the single action army Colt is still going strong. It's actually quite a good representation of the single action army. The most interesting thing is the ability to load different ammunition and to manufacture different ammunition. So we saw hollow points there, which work well against unarmoured targets, not working well against an armoured target. And so we see a switch to normal ammunition, either hard cast lead or full metal jacket would have much the same effect, and that has the penetration to defeat not modern body armour, but repurposed sportswear of the sort that we see in the Fallout universe. We've got yet another very convenient reload animation, which I don't blame them for at all. You'd be there for quite a while if you had to depict it realistically. So we have the player incredibly adept at simultaneously rotating the cylinder and ejecting the spent cases, which in reality tend to stick in the chamber and need to be ejected by the ejector rod, and then immediately pressing home the replacement rounds. It's a system that can be leveraged for gameplay reasons to make, if you want to make the revolver more powerful but slower to reload. Here it's kind of a balance where it's moderately powerful but not as slow to reload as it would be in real life. Come on. We've got a suspiciously Mad Max looking character there, wielding that character's, or a take on it, iconic double-barreled sawn-off shotgun. In fact, the Fallout version is actually a craft-produced weapon. It's not an old world, pre-nuclear, cut-down shotgun like the one behind me there. It's been made from scratch. On the subject of the coin shot, that's, I suspect, based on real history in that, well, or at least folklore, where you load a shotgun cartridge with a stack of quarters or whatever as a sort of homebrew form of shot, as the game calls it, coin shot. If metal is scarce, why wouldn't you do that? And it wouldn't be as effective as lead shot, but it would still hurt. Well, that puts a smile on the face, doesn't it? The Fat Man Nuka Launcher, based on some real technology, the Davy Crockett Tactical Nuclear Launcher. It's not quite as portable as this, but it's not too far off. Crew served, so you need several guys to carry and operate it. Terrifying, the idea that we were sort of looking at not only battlefield nukes, but tactical battlefield nukes. So you'd be within hundreds of meters of a nuclear explosion. Absolute insanity, and luckily we didn't go down that route. But they did in the Fallout universe, and so we now have a shoulder-fired nuclear weapon. Used at point-blank range. Technically point-blank range is something else, but in terms of too close is the definition of point-blank. That wasn't great. I think I saw some crippled limbs there. I think that's the minimum you'd expect from a nuclear bomb going off in your face, but it definitely took care of the critter there. I did forget for a while that the Browning High Power was actually in the game, but of course you start the game with it. And it's pretty much vanilla. It's as though it's been hanging around for 200 years or whatever, and it's still working, which is not entirely implausible, like so many of the guns in this game. Weird glitch in the reload animation, well, less a glitch, more of an oversight, which we've seen in other things, where the slide is forward, and when you reload, the slide magically opens to the rear, sort of shortcutting the animation, I suppose. But the high power is pretty well represented. The cartridge cases that are coming out are immense, though, for some reason. They look like grenade launcher rounds. Not quite sure why that is. They wouldn't fit in the gun. We've got modifications with an extended magazine and an IPSC style sight mount. Now that's something that definitely wouldn't survive 200 years knocking around in the wasteland. Guns are quite robust, optical sights really aren't. That was the 10mm pistol, of course. This one's been fitted somehow, I think it's modded, with a suppressor which has no hole in the end, which is bizarre and would result in it blowing off the end of the gun. Now, where reality intersects with this is that weapons like the well rod used rubber wipes, and they do in fact seal off the end of the suppressor, so it almost looks like there's no hole in the end. And then the first shot is super quiet because it's having to penetrate the layers of rubber, and then the subsequent sort of 10 or so shots are very quiet because the gas is sealed behind them as they squeeze through the rubber, and then after about a dozen shots the rubber is sufficiently abraded and worn out that basically it's back to being a normal suppressor. So it's still working, but it's not as quiet. That's not what we see here. What we see here is a cock-up. To my shame, I have still not gone back and played Fallout 1 and 2. I gather that the Blade Runner blaster, which is obviously what we see here, first appeared in Fallout 2, I think, and made a reappearance in this game. It's a pretty faithful representation of this fictional detective sidearm. It's a bit of a deviation from the real Blade Runner blaster in that, well, we don't know what ammunition that chambers. In fact, we don't even know how it chambers ammunition, because the real prop was a Charter Arms Bulldog 44 Special with a swing-out cylinder, as we see in the Fallout version. looks amazing. It's one of the most iconic sci-fi weapons ever. But in terms of how it would work in universe, it makes little sense. What do the lights mean? What do they do? In Fallout, we see the amber and green light as to sort of denote loaded and unloaded. Although you kind of know when it's loaded because the cylinder's in. So they've kind of recognised that the blinky lights might have a purpose. The ones on the prop, they're just for show. One of the enjoyable things about the Fallout games is the mixture of projectile weapons and effectively ray guns. Obviously the gameplay difference they've gone for here, other than green versus red, is a slow-moving blob, for want of a better term, for the plasma, that when if you manage to hit with it, does high damage, whereas the laser's more of a beam, and per shot it's lower damage, but if you get more on target, you do the same damage. It's that classic RPG trade-off. I really like the design, with the exception of the bizarre energy system. Firstly, that this power pack at the bottom is so tiny, doesn't really make much intuitive sense. And secondly, that for some reason, it's installed on a really flimsy looking bracket, which you then have to rotate it into contact. Why can't you just plug it in? But I quite like how kind of Heath Robinson the designs of these are. It's almost like they've got plasma and laser technology, but they haven't got too far into the technology of it before the nukes hit. Now, it's always a bit sad when we come to a weapon that we don't have in the Royal Armoury's collection, and the China Lake grenade launcher is sadly one of those. It's not a bad depiction for the limitations of the graphics. They based it pretty closely on the real thing. It's got one extra round. The China Lake only fits 3 rounds in. If you think of the length of even the standard short 40mm grenades, you're struggling to fit more than 3 in a weapon that compact. We also see plasma rounds being used, and I always find that intriguing in my fiction when you've got a sort of legacy firearm that power is multiplied by changing the ammunition. And we've already seen that. We've got modern ammunition loads for the same cartridge type for guns 50, 100 years old that make them noticeably more effective. And there's no reason why in the future that, not this, but a weapon that we use today that's less effective in the future can keep pace simply by upgrading the ammunition. I always found the Fallout minigun more appealing as an idea than an actual weapon. I didn't get on with it particularly well. Don't really understand why it's 5mm when 5.56 is in the game. The bores of the barrels are very clearly bigger than 5mm. The design is not that close to the real minigun sitting behind me there. It has a cluster of rotating barrels, that's about it really. Curiously, although the character wears a backpack when he carries this thing, that's not where the ammunition is. But in the game, the ammunition magazine drum thing, whatever the hell it is, it's like a filing cabinet drawer that goes into the side of the gun. That's what feeds the cartridges. So the backpack is presumably an enormous battery. It always used to irk me as well that the cartridge cases, which again are far too big for a 5mm caliber, come kind of tumbling out of the side of the gun like 20 at a time. Rapid fire machine guns like this tend to have like a cascade of spent brass, but not like a storm of it coming out the side. That always looked a bit weird. This revolver, the Ranger Sequoia massive 6-shooter, is fairly similar to the Magnum Research BFR. We haven't got one, but I'm not too upset because we do have a couple of these. This is the Century Manufacturing Model 100, and it is tremendously huge. It's also chambered in 45-70. which the BFR in the real world is not. It is a clone of the single action army, like the BFR is, and it has a gigantic brass frame. It's actually bigger than the in-game model, proportionately. A quirk of the in-game model is that it fires with the hammer down, as though it's a double action revolver, so when you pull the trigger, the hammer comes back and is released in one go. So yes, ludicrous, massively powerful, impractical revolvers do get made. I've never been entirely clear on how the Gauss Rifle in Fallout's supposed to work. I'm guessing that the reloadable cartridge thing is the projectile, and that somehow the thing is powered, or possibly that the developers did not know what a Gauss gun is. There is a there's the rail gun, which uses parallel rails to accelerate a projectile. So it's a projectile weapon, but it's using tremendous amounts of energy to accelerate it. So it's almost a hybrid between a projectile and a directed energy weapon. Gauss guns, as I understand it, are similar principle, but with a series of coils that accelerate the projectile. That isn't really what we see, and I have a feeling this is just a cool sci-fi name attached to a single-shot blue energy weapon, because the blue energy release that we see on impact doesn't really reflect how Gauss or railguns actually work. The only flash you see from those is an explosion, effectively a flame, from the tremendous heat created by the impact. So, nice idea, but it's perhaps a bit of a fudge, maybe. I think that's probably meant to be a single-shot energy weapon, essentially. Of all of the machine guns to survive into the end of the world, I'm not sure that the FN Minimi will be one of them. The thing that really stands out are the terrible sights, weird inverse iron sights, where the front sight post becomes an aperture and the rear sight is a post. It's not how sights work. There's also a weird quirk of this in that the in-game Minimi, like machine gun, correctly can chamber and fire both 5.56 and 223 caliber ammunition. The game doesn't take that approach. The game takes the view that 5.56 is military, so it must be more powerful. Therefore, the 223, the civilian version, must be less powerful. Just being 5.56 or 223 doesn't make any difference. The original loads of both are equally damaging, and being a game, because it does less damage, it wears your gun out less quickly, whereas it wouldn't make any difference. The Minimi with a 5.56 chamber could fire 223 all day long until it breaks. Would not work in that way. You don't get less wear for less damage. But of course that's a classic RPG trade-off. If you'd like to support what we here at the Royal Armouries are doing in various ways, including over on our own channel as well, and here with our friends at GameSpot, we have links in the description for ways that you can do that. Otherwise, I'll see you again next time. Thanks very much.